What I've been talking about so far are issues that conservationists debate that really make a difference to our decisions in the way we act. For example, removing those feral goats from San Clemente Island, controlling rabbits, controlling squirrels, removing exotic plants from national parks. Those are things that people involved in conservation and environmental protection are doing and talking about all the time. The topic in the essential reading and a bit of the additional reading as well goes into things that are more not really practical questions that people are proposing at the moment, well, with maybe just a little bit, as I'll come to, connection with that. But I think they're philosophically interesting questions that are worth talking about that do relate to our values. So there is predation in nature, obviously, and that means that a lot of animals get killed and that there's a significant amount of suffering. Should we be doing anything about that? Is it something that even raises a question for us? This question often comes up when you talk about the treatment of animals in general. So, for example, when I talk about what it's ethical for us to eat, people will often then say, well, if you think that we ought not to be eating turkeys or pigs or cows, what about lions eating antelope or zebra? Is that wrong for them to do? Now, at one level, you can just say, that's a silly question because the lion can't really think about the ethics of what it's eating in the way that we can. And even if somehow you imagine it could, the lion's digestive system requires it to eat meat. The lion is not going to survive by eating plants in a way that we can survive. So we are omnivores, whereas lions are carnivores. So you could reject the question in that way. But there could be a further response which could say, yeah, well, it's true the lion can't make the choice, and it's true that you can't criticise the lion morally, as Prince Charles seemed to criticise the grey squirrels. You can't say the lion is pernicious because it kills the zebra. But nevertheless, you might say, we could do something about this. Don't we have the power to do something about this? And if this predation causes all this suffering and loss of life, maybe we should. So there are various possibilities here. One case of predation that is, so here's the lion, by the way, killing the zebras, or a couple of, there's 3 of them there, is there, or something? Lionesses killing a zebra, rather gory way. There's video on YouTube, if you want to look at it, of predators. I thought of showing you, actually, there's a pretty horrible one of a lion killing an animal which sort of half gets away, and then the lion grabs it back again, or something like that. There's, obviously the idea that these predators kill instantly and humanely is a myth, if any of you were thinking that. They don't necessarily go for the jugular or anything like that. Maybe some species are more likely to do that than others, but very often they will just start basically eating the animal while it's still alive. So it's certainly not necessarily humane. So yeah, this is from Jeff McMahon's article, the response actually, where he wrote the initial piece and then got a lot of responses which he thought that were not, basically people who had not really read what he said very carefully. And one of the objections was that if we were to get rid of predators, what would happen to the environment? This goes back to the Aldo Leopold quotation I gave you on Monday, where if you get rid of the wolves, the deer overgraze the forest and eventually you have a population crash. But one of the things that McMahon says in response is sometimes we're actually trying to save predators where they're already down to very small numbers. And an example is the Siberian tiger. So probably if people think about saving endangered species, something like the tiger is one of the iconic megafauna that we think ought to be saved, that we would support efforts to save the tiger. And the Siberian tiger is specific, again, I think a subspecies, I'm not sure if it's actually a different species, that is particularly endangered. So suppose that we succeed in bringing back the Siberian tiger across a large part of its range where it no longer exists. That would be something that we might be able to achieve if we put a lot of effort into it. The result, McMahon says, would be a lot of herbivores that are being killed, dying in terror and agony while being devoured by a tiger. So what he's suggesting is that that's at least something that we ought to think about if we're trying to make this decision. If we're trying to think, should we restore predators that are almost extinct? Should we try to restore them, increase their numbers across a large range? Then on the one hand, we think it's good to have these animals. We don't want them to become extinct. It would be a tragedy if the tiger became extinct, something like the other species that we have caused to go extinct over many years. But on the other hand, McMahon is saying this at least is to be considered to weigh in the balance. And that's a case where you can say we would be intervening in nature if we were to try to restore the Siberian tiger. So if your objection to the idea of saying we ought to do something about predation is, well, this is natural and we ought not to intervene, then we would be intervening if we restore the tiger. The response that somebody might make, of course, is, well, here the intervention would be to reverse a prior intervention. We're just trying to undo our previous intervention, which was what helped to get rid of the tiger. We either shot the tigers for trophies or because we believe that tiger bones are a great medicine or something of that sort, or we just wiped them out in certain areas where we wanted to graze grazing animals and we didn't want tigers attacking our grazing animals. So you could say, well, we're trying to undo what we've done in the past, and in that sense it's different from other kinds of intervention in nature. But we could also challenge, and I think McMahon is also doing this, we could challenge the idea that somehow what is natural is good and we ought in general not to interfere with it. That's an assumption that people very often make, but really when you think about it, there are a lot of things in nature that are clearly not good. You saw the guinea worm as an endangered species that we're trying to get rid of last time. So we don't think that it's somehow natural that the guinea worm is parasitical upon human beings and therefore we ought to just accept it, or that it's natural that there are malarial mosquitoes in certain regions and we ought to just accept them. On the contrary, we do get rid of them, and I think those decisions are justified. Where we have the ability to intervene in nature in ways that are clearly going to be good, I think that's a reasonable thing to do. So I think this question is a real question that we ought to be considering. And the other example, one of your reading that we had, does relate to a creature that is clearly not natural or not natural in the United States. This reading was actually under the previous section, but I thought when I was preparing the lecture that in a way it belongs better under the predation area. It does also relate to species conservation because, as this University of Georgia study showed, cats are really quite big killers, and if you have domestic cats and you allow them outdoors, they're very likely to be killing quite a large range of animals. Now, I know that a lot of people have the firm conviction that even if other cats kill, their little Mogs does not kill. I've had this said. Sometimes I've been involved in animal movement in various kinds, and animal movement politics, and I've actually run a meeting about cats as threats to wildlife. Again, this was in Australia where suburban development meant that there was a national park where there were people moving in and they had cats. They let their cats go outside, and the cats were clearly killing wildlife in the national park. There was no fence or anything. They were just leaving their suburban homes at night and going out to kill whatever they could find. And the suggestion was being made that a curfew ought to be imposed, that cats ought not to be allowed outside at night, because at night was when they were most effectively hunting in any way, so that people ought to keep their cats inside. And so I had on the one hand these conservationists in one side of the room saying this is terrible, all these birds are being killed and small marsupials in the national park, and on the other people saying, well, maybe some cats kill, but my cat doesn't, so why shouldn't I allow my cat to be outside? Part of the thing is that, as I say, cats seem to kill, from this study in Athens, Georgia, at the University of Georgia, cats kill quite often. They kill quite a wide range of creatures, and they don't always bring them back. Some people say, well, yes, once or twice my cat will bring back a dead bird that it's killed. So occasionally it does kill a sparrow or something like that. Of course, only non-endangered species. But in fact, cats kill. Cats don't always bring back. They only bring back a small percentage of what they kill. Some of what they kill they eat. Some of what they kill they just leave. If you want to look at it, I don't know whether you can see this down here. The colour is not very good, but it's called kitty cams. So what they did was they put little cams on the kitties, on the kittens, so they could see what they were doing at all times, including at night. So it's kittycams.uga, University of Georgia, Athens.edu, if you want to look at it. And just to finish off, so if you haven't seen this, again, you can have a look at it. So this is also an animal welfare conflict, I guess. Cats no doubt enjoy going outside, but they do seem to do a lot of damage to other animals, and in some cases at least they're killing endangered species. Okay, if anybody has a quick question, we probably have a minute or two for it. I'm through. Let me just say, otherwise, the other thing that I didn't talk about, and I put it in the additional reading there rather than the essential reading, but the other question that's just been raised recently online in some web forums about animal ethics is what about wild animals in general? Is life for a wild animal in general a positive or not? And you can read something by Brian Tomasic on that, arguing that when you take into account the number of animals that don't make it through even their first days, that either starve or get killed by predators, he's raising questions about whether, in fact, wild animals are in a positive state or whether they suffer more than they enjoy life. I don't know what we would do with that information, even if it was right. Whether it would suggest that we ought to reduce the number of wild animals, but I just put it there as, again, right out on the far edge.